He said, show me the game. And he showed him it was 7 against 7. Madden said, where are the rest of the guys? He said, well, we don't need linemen. Madden says, I was a lineman and I'm not putting my name on anything that is an 11 against 11.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is our critically acclaimed Saturday sit-down. And by critically acclaimed, I mean those of you that have emailed me, ross@rosstucker.com, and let me know how much you've been enjoying these conversations. Today, we have Rich Podolsky, who not only worked with Brent Musburger and Irv Cross and Jimmy the Greek Snyder on the NFL Today forever. He just wrote the definitive book on John Madden and Pat Summerall, absolute football legends. Let's dive into some of these stories with Rich, and then I got some news for Sunday's games at wide receiver and quarterback. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Man, am I excited to talk about this topic with this guy and this book. The name of the book is Madden and Summerall, How They Revolutionized NFL Broadcasting. And to me, they will probably always be the greatest broadcasting duo of all time, which is why when I found out about this book that was written by Rich Podolsky, I thought, yep, that would be perfect to talk to Rich for a Saturday sit-down or an off-season interview, because the more I can learn about John Madden and Pat Summerall, the better, because those are my guys. Rich, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. It's funny because I've had several people say to me in recent years that I remind them a little bit of John Madden, or that I have some Madden in my repertoire, I guess, when I'm calling games. Probably just because I was a lineman like he was. But it's funny because I guess I do say boom and bam sometimes when I'm using the telestrator and it's a good block. And I'm sure I got that from him, consciously or subconsciously. Like, I don't know. When you watch someone do a million games, I think that's just kind of, you learn that from him. So I'm thrilled that you're doing the book. Why don't we start with that you wrote this book? What was kind of the genesis of it, Rich?
Well, I work with these guys at CBS Sports, and 4 years ago, I wrote a book about the history of the NFL today, because I was the writer on that show, and that was a lot of fun. We wrote about all the backstabbing and the fights between Brent and the Greek, and how Phyllis George became a big star, et cetera. And, that was the first show really to go live, to have a woman on, to have an African-American on as a co-host. And it created stars out of the four of them. And they were people that America just didn't know, and they became stars overnight. And the show won 13 Emmys its first year. So I was talking to one of my colleagues, Janice Delson, who worked at both CBS and Fox during all those years, after that book came out. And she said she wanted to write a Substack, because she had a lot of good stories about Summerall and John Madden. And I said, well, why don't you just write a book? And she said, I don't know how to write a book. I said, I'll help you. I'll organize it for you. I won't take a dime. I won't put my name on it. Just, you could do it. And she said, you write the book and I'll give you the stories and you could go from there. Well, I thought about it for a while, and I thought that there were a couple of important people that I would need to get in touch with to make this work. One of them was a guy named Terry O'Neill, who was the executive producer who put the two of them together, Madden and Summerall. And the other was Van Gordon Sauter, who was the new president of CBS Sports, who decided to split up Summerall and Brookshire, and he was the one who wanted Madden to be his number one analyst, even though Madden only had 2 years of broadcasting experience, and neither year did he have a game go back to New York. He was still learning, but they went with Madden, and O'Neill came in and talked him into using Summerall, and that's a story within itself.
Wow. So there's a lot there. The one thing I would tell you is that um, September 21st, okay, you and I are talking here on September 29th, but September 21st, I'm sure you saw this, Rich, but CBS
Mhm.
celebrated 50 years of the NFL today. And I call games for CBS. I'm on the sixth crew. And so I got to be on the NFL Today pregame show with Brent Musburger on it. And so we dressed in the 70s a little bit, and Brent was the one that threw it to us and was talking with us, which was just the coolest thing you could ever imagine. I mean, just
Oh, it had to
so
be a
cool.
lot
Because
of
I
fun.
remember, Rich, I distinctly remember, and I was born in 79, but I distinctly remember my dad and I basically racing home from church. We had 10:30 mass, ended 11:30. I wanted to get home by noon, but because I wanted to watch the NFL today. You are looking live, and
Yeah.
it was so cool. And my dad and I would watch, and then obviously we'd watch the Eagles game, and my dad would get frustrated and whatever. But it was, a shared experience. It was a cool shared experience. So that's cool. I didn't know you wrote a book about the NFL today
Yeah, the
and
book
that
was
you were part
called
of
You.
that.
The book was called You Are Looking Live. And early in the book, I tell how that expression came to be. Um, Producer Mike Pearl, director Bob Fishman, and Brent and a couple of the other people like Irv Cross were sitting around in a production meeting. And Fishman said, I've got a bunch of buddies who always want to know what the weather is going to be at these game sites because they bet on the games. And Brent thought for a second and said, when we do the whip around at the beginning, when we go from game to game to game, and he said, well, I can say you are looking live at Soldier Field, and you'll show it, and you'll see whether it's snowing or raining or the sun's out. And then you are looking live at Vet Stadium in Philly, and that worked. And he said that at the beginning of every show for 15 years.
Oh man. I didn't know that as a kid, but it just obviously it pumped you up. It got you excited for the game. Like, oh man, there's the stadium. That's what it's going to look like. They're going to be there playing soon. Even though evidently it was a gambling thing, for us it just kind of got you pumped up.
Yeah, I'll tell you one more thing before we get to Madden Summerall about the whip around. Brent invented the job of hosting a show like that. Nobody was ever better. But Brent had this obsession with wanting to have everybody's news and dispensing it first. So he would listen in to the guys who were rehearsing for the whip around, and he would hear if there was an injury that they were going to report in the whip around, or if somebody wasn't going to play or whatever. So instead of throwing it, excuse me, to Summerall and Brookshire, he would say, "Tell us about that injury to Roger Staubach," and they'd be left tongue-tied. He'd be stealing, as Mike Pearl used to say, he'd be stealing their news. Well, they hated him for doing that, and there were production meetings where Pearl had to separate them and keep them apart because they wanted to. Brookshire, especially, you're from Philly. Brookshire especially wanted to kill him.
Oh my gosh.
You ought to get that book. You'll love it.
That is funny. All right, so how did so Madden and Summerall, you mentioned that the NFL Today folks became stars. I mean, obviously Madden and Summerall became stars. Were you part of that crew in some way, Rich?
Well, I got there in '77. Summerall started as broadcaster in '62. He was he was a Renaissance man. He was the first guy to go from the field to the booth and then change roles and become play-by-play guy. And he did that in '74. So he had been almost 20 years on the air when he was paired with Madden to be the play-by-play guy. And he had to even change his role then because he realized that Madden was special. Madden needed the space to tell his stories and to spin his yarns and to give those special little details that he knew about the players, their mannerisms, their slang, the things that made them special and him special. And Summerall gave up of himself and made sure he got in at the right time and he got Madden off a limb when he went too far.
Wow. Can you give me like an example?
An example.
Well, so basically, the issue with Summerall is not the issue, but the positive is he was just a minimalist, right? Which
He,
gave Madden all
he
kinds of
was.
room.
He was a minimalist. One of the executives said, if somebody could say something in 10 words, Pat could say it better in five. And he learned that from working with Ray Scott. Ray Scott was a great play-by-play announcer for CBS in the '60s and early '70s, and he was first known to be the Green Bay play-by-play guy, and he would just simply let the pictures do the talking. And if there was a touchdown pass, he would simply say, "Star, Dowler, touchdown," and that's all you needed. Bart Starr to Boyd Dowler and the Green Bay touchdown. And that was Ray Scott. Summerall idolized him. And when he became a play-by-play guy himself, he tried to copy that style. Now, Madden knew he had to cut down once he started doing games. In fact, he almost got fired his first year on the job because the executives didn't understand what he was trying to do. He was going over in the play-by-play guy's territory. He wasn't giving the play-by-play guy enough time to set up, the tight ends on the left, the wide receivers on the right, etc. And he had to figure it out himself. Nobody helped him at CBS. And he did 4 games his first year, and each game was with a different play-by-play guy, a different director, and a different producer. No wonder he couldn't learn anything. He couldn't get a rhythm. And he had to go home, look at the tapes, and figure out on his own how to cut back. Well, he almost got fired that first year, and he saved his job at a Super Bowl pregame luncheon in January of 1980, where there were 500 people packed in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel ballroom. And Madden wound up on the dais, and they asked he and George Allen and Hank Stram, who were all announcers for CBS, if they'd ever go back to coaching. And the other two went first and said, no, 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 we're happy. And then it was Madden's turn. Madden got up, walked down the row to the very end where Pete Rozelle was, the commissioner. He put his hand on Pete Rozelle's shoulder and squeezed it and said, I get asked all the time about NFL officiating. And then he just stood there and laughed and put his arms out. And he had this big sheepish grin. Rozelle broke out laughing. The entire room broke up. And then he proceeded to go into a 5-minute routine about NFL officiating and why it drives coaches crazy. And at that point, he had the entire room in the palm of his hand. And the CBS executives knew he wasn't just another coach who wanted to be an analyst. They saw him for what he could be. And that saved his job.
Wow. What Rich, what was their relationship like, Pat and John? It's funny, because I guess growing up, when you're watching them on TV and they're together on TV on your TV every Sunday, you just kind of assume, I guess, that these guys are like best friends and they hang out all the time. But now that I'm actually a broadcaster, I realize it's not really like that. I mean, you work with them and you might really like your play-by-play person or the sideline person or whatever,
Mm.
but it's not like you're with them all the time, like some people might think, it's a little bit different than that. I'm curious about both their on-air and their kind of off-air relationship. I guess more their off-air relationship.
Well, we have to back up to the 6.5 years Summerall and Brookshire were together. They were together on and off the field constantly. Summerall used to say we'd arrive on Thursday, get home on Tuesday. We'd start having margaritas the second we got there, and we never stopped. And they got in a lot of trouble on Fridays and Saturday nights. Brookshire especially liked to pick bar fights. And finally, the word of their escapades got back to the main office, and the new president of CBS, Van Sauter, wanted to split them up because of it. And he thought they both had drinking problems, and he didn't want either one of them to be part of the number one team. But once he decided that he wanted Madden, he hired this guy, Terry O'Neill, who was a brilliant producer from ABC. He was only 31 years old, to run CBS's NFL production. And Terry pointed out that if they used Vince Scully as the play-by-play guy, who was the one that Van Sauter wanted, that it would be Scully talking all the time and Madden trying to talk all the time, and the viewer would be wrung out by halftime. You needed somebody like Summerall who was willing to give up of himself and make room for Madden to become the John Madden we all knew. And they worked out what I call the contest in the book. For the first 4 weeks in the season, in the 81 season, Scully worked with Madden. The next 4 weeks in October, Summerall worked with Madden. And on Monday, October 26th, all the CBS executives got together and voted. And they all voted for Summerall. And to Van Sauter's credit, he went along with it. And that's how they wound up getting together. And the results showed immediately. They started finishing each other's sentences. Excuse me one second. But their relationship off the air was far different than Pat's and Brookie's. Pat and Summerall and John Madden were friendly, and they respected each other. And I believe that later in their 21 years together, they loved each other. But they didn't hang out together. I don't think they ever had a dinner alone together. They just weren't that, they didn't have that kind of lifestyle. Summerall liked to go out Saturday nights with the executives from the other teams and have dinner. Madden liked to go hang out with the young kids that they hired as the broadcast associates. And I'll give you an example. They hired 9 broadcast associates right out of college in 1981 when Terry O'Neill came in. One of them was Mike Arnold, who you know from CBS, the director who's now done 7 Super Bowls. Another is Richie Zients, who has done 8 Super Bowls for Fox. But they were young kids just learning the ropes in 81. They go to Washington, D.C. for a game. And when they get there at the hotel, there's a note for waiting for Madden. And the note is from Ethel Kennedy, the widow of former RFK, the brother of the late president. And the note says, John, we're huge fans. We'd love to have lunch or dinner with you this weekend while you're in D.C. And Mike Arnold looks up at him like a stargaze kid and says, geez, John, are you going to have dinner with Ethel Kennedy? And Madden looks down at him and says, nah, I'm going to have Mexican food with you guys. And that's who John Madden was. He liked to hang out with the guys, with the kids. They go out for deli, they go out for Mexican. in Texas, he had his famous places to get those stub sandwiches. He didn't want any fancy steak dinners. In fact, his best friend, John Robinson, the ex-coach, used to kid him when they went on the bus with John that they never stopped anywhere that had a tablecloth, you know. So that's the difference between Madden and Summerall off the air. But there was love and respect between them on the air. And when that red light went on, they were great together. Like one of John's sons said, it was like peanut butter and jelly meeting for the first time.
So basically, Summerall liked the higher class with the executives,
Mhm.
the nicer life, the nicer
Right.
restaurant, that kind of stuff, drinking whatever he was drinking. And Madden was the meat and potatoes and beer guy with the young people on the crew.
Now, since you brought up beer, I'm going to throw it to the Miller Lite commercial. That's what really made him famous, because Miller Lite went to Al Davis in 1980, the owner of the Raiders, and said, "We want you for the Miller Lite commercials that we do with all the former players who were kind of rough and tumble." And Davis said, "Why don't you ask John? John just retired after 10 years of coaching. He'd be much better for that than me." So they go to John, they offer it to him. And John says, "Well, I'll talk it over with my family. I'll let you know." At dinner with his two sons and his wife, Virginia, he says, "What do I want to do a beer commercial? I don't even like beer." And and she said, "You got something else going for you?" That's So the next thing you know, he's crashing through the wall of the beer of the local bar, saying tastes great, less filling. And America loved him for it. He was the everyman that Miller Lite was looking for. And, he was great doing those commercials, whether it was the beer or the video game or Tinactin or whatever it was. He took a product that already existed and he took it to new heights. He didn't create light beer or the video game, but he legitimized them and he made those genres his own. He was really something. And I have to laugh at when with the video game. They came to him, the owner of EA came to him and said, "We want to put your name on this." He said, "Show me the game." And he showed him it was 7 against 7. Madden said, "Where are the rest of the guys?" He said, "Well, we don't need linemen." Madden says, "I was a lineman and I'm not putting my name on anything that is in 11 against 11." So they came back to him about a year or two later, and they offered him 2,000 shares at $6 a share when it went public. I don't know if you heard today, the company just is going private for 55 billion. Madden turned it down, by the way. He said, "I invested enough in this company." He was getting licensing money every time they used his name. But
Wow. Awesome.
nobody had to cry for John Madden.
Hey, Rich, thank you so much for the time. This is fantastic. Check out the book, Madden and Summerall, How They Revolutionized NFL Broadcasting, with the forewords by Joe Buck and Troy Aikman from our guy, Rich Podolsky. Rich, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Ross, as a former Eagles fan and a guy growing up in Philly, I thank you.
All right, let's dive into the news. But first, can't emphasize enough whether you're going to a Jordan Davis concert on Friday night in Hershey or you're looking for college or NFL games, please trust me and check out the Game Time app. They have lowest price guarantee. They have these last minute ticket deals, which you'd be blown away by. The fees are included, which I like. And you can actually see what the view is like from your seat, which I don't even know how the technology works, but take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets or whatever tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code ROSS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code ROSS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today and then use that glorious code ROSS.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, lots of notable wide receiver news. No Puka Nacua. Garrett Wilson's doubtful for the Jets. With the Panthers, they're getting Jalen Coker back for the first game this year. And Marvin Harrison Jr., he's been cleared from concussion protocol.
No Puka Nacua as expected, but that's massive. He's one of the best offensive players in the entire sport. I can't remember the last time a doubtful guy played, so I'm not expecting Garrett Wilson to play for the Jets. Jalen Coker, I called a couple of his games at Holy Cross. I love that everybody's so excited about him getting another opportunity, and that's good news about Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd say the biggest news, Jack, and we posted a video on all platforms at Ross Tucker Pod yesterday. It's official. Carson Wentz starting at quarterback for the Vikings against the Eagles. Obviously, a lot of history there between Wentz and the Eagles. Still weird to see him starting for other teams against the Eagles. I guess I kind of thought he'd still maybe be the Eagles quarterback at this point 10 years ago, but that is not the case 7, 8 years ago, whatever. Should be a fun one on Sunday in Minnesota. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com, backofficescheduler.com, human@nyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.